and were attractive to her. Taught at Princeton Day School. Anastasio made a number of friends at the day school that would later become important figures in his musical career. Some of these would go on to contribute lyrics to Fish songs, while others would make occasional appearances at shows, playing a wide variety of instruments. Even though he left school as a teenager, Trey kept in contact with his old friends, and they would be somewhere in the background throughout most of his career. After leaving Princeton Day School, Trey attended Taft High School in nearby Watertown, Connecticut. It was here that he began songs well past their original length. It wasn't long before Anastasio became involved in one of the many musical projects based at the Taft High School. He auditioned for the position of drummer with an 8-man rock band called Red Tide and easily got the job. Red Tide specialised in renditions of the classic rock hits of the day. The music didn't challenge Trey particularly, but it was good practice and he enjoyed the band atmosphere. Two of his old friends from Princeton Day School, Mark Dobert and Dave Abrahams, also joined Red Tide, which had expanded to become an 11-piece outfit. Unfortunately, the venture was doomed to failure. Several members of Red Tide were older than Trey and his friends and were due to graduate a year earlier. When they left, the band was reduced to just 4 people, with Trey as the only remaining guitarist. Switching from drums to guitar, he began to prepare new material with the aid of his friends. Another old friend, Steve Pollock, began to hang out with the band, and it wasn't long before he also revealed his songwriting abilities. After seeing some of his lyrics, Trey and the band decided that Steve's work should be used for the music that Trey was composing. The new lineup eventually took their name from one of Steve's songs, Space Antelopes. The Space Antelopes were also only a short-lived affair, but they had much in common with Fish. They moved away from the big radio hits that Red Tide had played, preferring to learn numbers by lesser-known bands, as well as preparing their own material. Frequently, the songs used as the basis of jam sessions would eventually lead to new musical ideas. Trey's first attempts at songwriting were by no means perfect, and they don't stand up to his work with Fish, but they are surprisingly proficient for a teenager who had only comparatively recently begun playing the guitar. The band managed to attract a small local following during their short career and became a regular fixture at friends' parties. However, before long, it was time to graduate from high school and move on to college. All 4 boys intended to go to college, but they were headed to different parts of the country. Somewhat reluctantly, they folded Space Antelopes after playing their last official show. The friends kept in touch and would later on set the environment. Bands, becoming something of a drummer for hire. Trey's first year at university ended in June. Reluctant to simply return home and find a job, he began looking for more productive ways to spend the summer. Soon, the ideal opportunity presented itself. The town of Middlebury, Connecticut, was hosting the first National Guitar Summer Workshop. The workshop is a 2-week course in which students enroll for an intensive series of lessons, including impromptu jam sessions and guest lecturers drawn from the famous guitarists of the day. Trey signed up for the workshop and spent a fortnight honing his improvisational skills. All of the students were proficient in many different styles of guitar playing, so jamming with these people was often challenging for Trey. However, he thoroughly enjoyed the whole experience, and it taught him some lessons that would be very valuable in his future career. When Anastasio returned to university in the autumn, he immediately began looking for a bass player for the band. He placed adverts across the town and received an enthusiastic response. The best candidate was an electrical engineering student named Mike Gordon. Mike recorder. He set up making a decent demo of the band's early material. The tape, which would be known as Bivouac Jam, contained several songs, most of which had been written by Trey long before Fish had been formed. The other members had slowly added their own touches to the songs, changing the forms completely. Beep, 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 beep. 1984 was spent playing as many shows as possible. On a number of occasions, they were joined by Steve Pollock, Trey's high school songwriting partner. Steve had taken to writing his own songs, which he would perform on an acoustic guitar in front of small groups of friends and family members. His strange lyrics had earned him the nickname the Dude of Life, a title that he adopted and used throughout his sporadic recording career. He opened for Fish on many occasions and still collaborated with Trey, the results of which would sometimes be recorded by both Pollock and Fish. Fish's fame was slowly growing. The band were attracting a reputation for being a good-time party band, perfect for a less than serious atmosphere. They hadn't ventured much beyond Burlington yet, preferring to build up a strong following in the local area before moving further afield. Unfortunately, the intensive schedule caused problems for Mark Dover, who wanted to concentrate on his studies. Although he enjoyed the music and the shows, Mark felt it was time to bring his brief association with Fish to an end. In later years, he would make occasional appearances on stage and on record, always a welcome member of the Fish Collective, as it became known. With Dover no longer a member, Fish returned to the original four-piece lineup. Before long, another musician would express an interest in joining the band, although it would be some time before he was allowed into the ranks. Several new songs were written, which Anastasia would show to the rest of the band upon his return. At one point, Trey phoned Mike in Burlington, encouraging him to come out and join the others on their European tour. Mike refused, but told him McConnell had been and how perfect he would be for the band. But there was no convincing. He repeated his earlier decision that he did want keyboards and Fish. Fortunately for Page, he did eventually change his view. Upon their return to the United States, Trey and John began rehearsals for the autumn term, when Fish would re-establish their heavy gig schedule. Mike brought Page along to these sessions and convinced Trey, John and Jeff to give him another try. They reluctantly agreed, and Page brought his equipment. Thankfully, his natural talents and his familiarity with the material impressed the others, who realized that fear of offending, but it did seem Goddard had a considerably more lenient approach to their students. This immediately interested the pair, as they realized it could take the pressure off them to perform academically. In the middle of the summer break, they arranged to transfer from the University of Vermont to Goddard, citing Page as their recruiting agent, who received $50 for each enrollment. Goddard College proved to be a much better atmosphere for the band members. They attended their lectures whenever possible, and were rewarded on the basis of their ability rather than their attendance. Trey managed to find a tutor he admired and appreciated for his musical composition classes, and was awarded credits for his Fish songs. The band rented a cottage in the countryside, situated in the middle of a dense forest, and as free from distractions as possible. It had no television or radio, just a stereo for their music, very little else in the way of electricity, and no running water. Any water they needed was provided by a spring near the cottage, and retrieving water in the middle of winter was a less than pleasant task. However, the cottage did have its advantages. There was enough space for the band to set up all their equipment in the same room, and the isolation it provided allowed the band to focus on the music without outside interference. Frequently, the band would rise early in the morning, eat a basic breakfast, then jam for the rest of the day, only emerging to prepare more food long after the sun went down. With their studies back on track, the band entered a stable period. They continued to grow in popularity, and the winter of 1986 saw them become one of the most sought-after live acts in the area. Their activities were still mostly confined to Vermont because of the difficulties in combining travelling so far with attending college. Even so, over 200 people usually appeared at their shows. An extensive mail order network had sprung up, enabling tapes and news per album, and this time they wouldn't rely upon Trey's old 4-track. Instead, they would use money to hire a studio and make an album of truly professional standard. Having searched widely for the right venue, the band eventually travelled to the Euphoric Sound Studios in Revere, Massachusetts. As with the early tapes, Trey would be the producer, but he would collaborate with Gordon Hookaloo, a professional recording engineer who also produced. The resulting album was Junta. 10,000 copies were released, most of them on tape, but a few rarities were pressed on vinyl and sent to family members. Like many bands' early recordings, it suffers from a lack of consistency. Trey demonstrated his impressive compositional skills, with 4 of the songs lasting for over 10 minutes. The arrangements were becoming increasingly intricate, as Trey added elements of jazz and classical theory to his already complex works. The musicianship was largely faultless, and all 4 band's stock in trade, ranging from Poor Heart, an authentic southern bluegrass number, to the title track with its laid-back lounge tune quality. On the whole, Fish's attempt to create an impressive recording was a respectable success. They finally had an album that came close to the quality of the live performances. Just as Lawn Boy was completed, disaster struck. Junta had been re-released by Absolute A-Go-Go, and preparations were being made to distribute Lawn Boy nationally. Just as Lawn Boy was about to be shipped, Absolute's parent label, Rough Trade, folded, causing the dissolution of Absolute as well. Fish were left without a record deal, and without the funds or facilities to distribute Lawn Boy themselves. The album had to be shelved, while Fish tried to organise their national tour. To play a solo on a vacuum cleaner, which cut out halfway through, bringing the solo to an unfortunate end. Fish's first national tour also broke some records. They became the first band without a record contract to sell out the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. They played 2 nights at the hall, both packed out. It seemed that Fish's fame had spread further than they'd expected. It had in fact spread to the offices of Elektra, a major label record company. After seeing Fish's popularity in the North explode, executives at the company began to wonder whether the band could repeat the success in the rest of the country. The current national tour gave them the confirmation they were after. As soon as the band returned from the tour, officials began negotiations to sign Fish to the Elektra label. While they were working out the details of the contract with Elektra, cutting short every magazine article. It It's not difficult to see seagull to seagull to see seagull to seagull to seagull to see seagull to seagull to see seagull to see seagull to seagull to see seagull to seagull to see seagull to see seagull to see seagull to seagull to see seagull to see seagull to seagull to seagull to see seagull to see seagull to see